Everyone talking about the world being at his feet. He did win the Football Writers Association Football of the Year award. And yeah, just talking about how amazing Phil Foden is, considering he's not even 24 yet. Already got 5 league titles, 2 FA Cups, 4 League Cups, European Cup, 33 caps for England. He has been integral for Manchester City this season. Of course, they've had 1 or 2 injuries. He scored 25 goals this season and really has stepped up. And one of the articles in the Daily Mirror, John Cross has wrote, Foden made the exits of Riyad Mahrez and Ilkay Gundogan seem irrelevant. And I think that's a really good way of kind of summing up how Foden has been this season. You almost forget that they lost 1 or 2 names, that they've had these big injuries, because he has stepped up to the plate. But he wants to get better. He still doesn't really think he's at the level to be considered world class. We've got like a few stats in the Sun about how he scores 78% with his left foot, 19% with his right foot. Needs to improve on those stats, he reckons. So yeah, just talking about how he's still got some way to go to be considered world class. Do you think he's been a bit harsh on himself there, or do you think he's still got to prove a few points before he can be in that category?
Well, his manager thinks he needs to improve, Pep. He's always made that accusation against Phil, and he has.
Yeah.
Gareth Southgate spoke. I was at the Football Writers' Dinner in midweek, and Gareth spoke about him when he first saw him as in the under-16s with England, and how good he was, and then was told after he was 14. So I think Gareth was expecting more as well. So he's been fabulous, especially in 24, as we've turned the year. I mean, you know, he's got goals in the early part of the season, but he's got a real excess of goals. I think he's got 7 in the last 8, you know, which is, he's been absolutely on fire in the second part of the season.
Yeah.
And interestingly, that most people think his best position is now behind the striker, not on the left. So it'd be, again, watching what Gareth Southgate does in the Euros.
Which Gareth has said he wouldn't
He
play
doesn't
him
want
as.
to do that.
Yeah.
But it's a nice choice. He's blessed with a lot of good players, Gareth. And yeah.
I also think it's good that Phil Foden is saying he's still not at his best in a way.
Yeah.
There's a bit of humbleness there, isn't
Yes.
there? And actually, when you're 23, you're not at your peak yet.
No.
Really. I mean, and most players you hope will continue the journey that they're on. I mean, some players do progress early and maybe fade away, but you imagine someone like a Foden is only going to, well, you hope will only get better.
Yeah.
There was a bit of another thing, because I was at the dinner, and I've got to say this because I find this quite amazing.
Go on.
That if you said who has been Man City's best player probably ever, I'm pretty sure that De Bruyne would win. The football writers have never given it to the award to Kevin De Bruyne.
Wow.
4 City players have won it, and he hasn't. I mean, I know there's circumstances, because you can look back and you can say the brilliance of Hazard in that incredible season with Chelsea and Mo Salah likewise. But there's been 4 City players that won it. Diaz, who's been a great centre-half for him, Raheem Sterling, he's done really well when he was there at times, and obviously Phil Foden. Kevin De Bruyne has not won it. So, you know.
So you're going to start a campaign now to get him
I
to win.
mean,
And
this
Haaland
year,
as well.
and Haaland as well. Sorry, I mentioned he's the 4th one, but you know, Haaland had an outstanding season last year. Kevin De Bruyne had 5 months out this year. But if you think about it over the course of
bizarre.
9 seasons he's been there, I think
He's the standout name. Yeah.
How can he have not won it once?
Yeah, it is a strange one. You're quite
Yeah.
right to mention it, because he has been when he's been playing, and unfortunately recently injuries have been a bit of a problem for him, but he's been so consistent for them.
Year by
and
year.
match winners, and you know, in terms of
They've
even
won
sometimes
5 of the last 6 times if they win at the weekend now.
I know.
You know, how can he
It's
be in? Because
extraordinary.
anyone would ask, even Phil Foden would say, the top man is Kevin De Bruyne.
Yeah.
Well, even when we were talking earlier this season when he was injured, it was like, well, when De Bruyne is back, they're going to kick on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that shows
And
you
he was
how
the key,
yeah.
yeah, exactly how important he is. But it is bizarre that he's never won it.
Yeah.
I think he's won the PFA though. Hasn't
Yeah,
he?
well, the footballers decide that one, not the journalists.
Ooh, what are you trying to say there?
I could be in either camp, but so I'm lucky.
When you pick and when you're at the FWAs, you're like, oh, well, I'm very much a journalist here. Anyhow, shall we get to Crystal Palace? Because under Oliver Glasner in the last few weeks, they've been brilliant.
Yeah, they've been absolutely amazing. And there's this talk about in the Times about Eze and Elise and why they need to stay at Crystal Palace. So Eze linked with City and Spurs, Elise linked with Arsenal, Man United, Aston Villa. Palace could get about £140 million return on players who cost them less than 30 million combined. But the article is kind of exploring that Palace are in a similar spot to Brighton, with players like Moses Caicedo, Alexis McAllister. And, when you lose players like that, it really does affect you. And since Oliver Glasner took charge, they have the 4th best points per game in the league. And since Elise returned from injury around April 6th, he and Eze have been playing in tandem. Only 2 teams, City and Chelsea, have scored more goals. So the article's kind of not calling Palace out, but saying, does this mean that you've got to keep these players? And should you not be aiming a little bit higher than, kind of just being in this mediocre state we find season upon season? And they need to realise that staying together, they could actually achieve something really special rather than surrendering these players all the time, because these moves do have risk. Eze to City, not every City move works out. Look at Calvin Phillips, for example. I'm not saying that would happen, but there's no guarantees. Elise, if he went to Arsenal, you're competing with Bukayo Saka. Is that really what you want? And yeah, the article just goes into how the Premier League is better when the talent is spread across teams. And yeah, Palace just need to sort it out and keep these players. Sort it out and keep these players.
No, you're right. I mean, look at Mateta as well. He's come to the fore in recent games as well. And there's the link-up players you mentioned with Elise and Eze, and everything now going forward for Palace looks brilliant.
Yeah.
So you'd like to think that the owners and the board will be looking at it and thinking, if we strengthen, what could we achieve?
Well, to appease them players, you're going to have to do something, because Eze's 26, so he's got his time. If there is a big move out there, Champions League football, because he's definitely good enough to play Champions League football. He's brilliant. And Elise's 22, so there's time on his side. But he's got this centre-half position. He got an issue as well. What they do with Anderson? What they do with Gay? These are all issues the club have got. If you don't show any ambition within the club, these players will end up going.
Exactly.
Indeed.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.